Hello, folks. Welcome back to the Kanawha West Hancock Athletics Podcast. Dan Kroll here for episode 79. And I usually say tonight I have this guest, but we're recording this in the middle of the afternoon because Jack's retired and I'm out for the summer for summer break from teaching. So we get to do this in the middle of the day. But I do have former high school principal at Britt and West Hancock, Mr. Jack Fisher, on here with me today. How you doing today, Jack?
I'm doing good.
Good. I'm excited to talk about things from a little bit of a different lens here today, from an administrative viewpoint, and excited to talk to Jack about good times back in Britain at West Hancock. So before we get to Jack, I want to mention my sponsors, like always. I have 16 of them for today's episode, so a lot of money going into the Sanger Legacy Fund through this episode with Jack. I have Nick Schmidt, Paul Hauge, In His Image Photography, Levi Don Trucking, Miller and Sons Golf Cars, Jay Hiscocks of State Farm Insurance, Window World of Mason City, Swenson's Hardware, Nikki Riedesel, Realtor and Hairstylist, the Britt Car Truck Bike and Tractor Night Cruise, McNeese Tire and Auto, Ewing Funeral Home and Monument Company, Kelly Real Estate, Triple B's Food Trucks, Advanced Door Systems in Forest City, Doug and Kathy Zool. And then I also wanted to highlight that August 11th is the West Hancock Alumni Banquet. And then August 25th is the West Hancock Hall of Fame induction ceremony. We'll start that at the football game in Britt and move over to the country club after the game for the induction ceremony to honor some great people there. So make sure you get out to those events if you can. Way back when, 50 episodes ago, in episode 29, I talked to Rachel Leerar. Make sure you check out that episode if you haven't already. I'll have that linked on my Facebook posts once I get this up and going. All right, hit a few sponsors here, then we're going to talk to Mr. Fisher. Jay Hiscocks, State Farm Team in Britt, is a proud supporter of West Hancock and the Legacy Fund. For a free quota review, give Jay or Lindsay a call at 843-3563. Nikki Riedesel is now a realtor for Deemer Realty, as well as a hairstylist in Kanawha. Contact her at 762-3745 or 641-430-9098. Then McNeese Tire and Auto, just a mile west of Britt. Go to McNeese Tire and Auto for all your tire and auto needs. Levi Don Trucking is my next sponsor. Thanks to Levi Don for sponsoring my podcast. Contact him at 641-860-0077 or look him up on Facebook. And then Nick Schmidt is a mainstay sponsor for the podcast. He's a 2000 West Hancock grad and just wants to give back to the podcast or to the community and the Legacy Fund. So thanks to Nick Schmidt. And then Swenson's Hardware in Britt, owned by John Swenson since 1977. Check them out downtown Britt or at swensons.doitbest.com. All right, Jack, here we go. What
Okay.
is keeping you busy these days down in Waukee?
Well, first of all, Dan, I just want to thank you for having me on,
You bet.
and I appreciate everything that you've done for Britt and West Hancock.
I
I
appreciate it.
I really like that. And I just want to tell you that as far as to begin with here, I just want to preface a little bit, Ben, I'm not someone from Britt originally. I'm a little different status there. I just want you to know I've been involved in high school athletics as a participant, as a supervisor, as a coach, as a spectator since the late 1940s. So I've been at it a while. And I've enjoyed every bit of it on there, I can tell you that. And so I did just recently move from Britt down to an independent living facility. It's called the TVO Trail in Waukee. So I've been busy with doing whatever you have to do to get ready to move and to move. So I've been here just about a month now.
Okay. And I assume it's because you have kids down in the area. Is that a good guess?
Well, I not real close, no, but my son lives in the Kansas City area,
Okay.
and my daughter lives in Colorado.
Okay.
But there was just various reasons why I chose here. I know the area, and this is an area I just chose to come to.
Nice. Yep. It's a lot going on in Waukee these days. I know that.
Oh
It's
boy.
a, it's a booming place. Sounds like they're going to be ready for a third high school here before you know it.
Well, the way they're building houses, that wouldn't surprise me one bit.
Yeah. Like Waukee Northwest is only what, like 3 or 4 years old, and they said they're already kind of bursting at the seams, so they're gonna be ready pretty soon.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I first moved to Britt, my son and his family lived here in Waukee. They were moving. And so my job was to go get the boys at school. That was my job, while they were moving. So I went over to school to get them. And at that time, that school district was one building for K through 12, and it was not as big as the Britt school district.
Jeez, that's nuts.
Yeah, it is.
They can't keep up at this point. I don't know how many
No,
elementary schools they have, but probably a dozen or so by now.
I have no idea.
Yeah, yeah. I know Rick Sanger lives in the area, and his girls go to
Yes.
Northwest, and him and I will ride up to Britt together for to games or away games, and he'll be telling me some of that stuff, and it's just blowing my mind how fast they're growing and what's all going up everywhere around there. It's just crazy. So
Well, from what I've been told about where Rick lives, evidently it's not very far from where I am.
okay, yep, I've been there, but I don't know the metro well enough to tell you where it's by or whatnot. I always have to GPS it to get there every time. So yeah. Let's talk pre-Brit here. You are a graduate of Pacific Junction. I don't know where Pacific Junction is. Can you fill us into where that is and maybe what school it's involved with now?
I was born and raised in Pacific Junction, which is in the southwest part of the state. I don't know if you are familiar with Glenwood or not, but it's 4 miles south and west of Glenwood. Or if you want to go the other way on Interstate 29 on there now, it's just about 20 miles from Council Bluffs, south of Council Bluffs,
Okay.
where it is. It was a town where floods were always involved, and it got hit real bad with the last flood. And my understanding is now that there is not a lot left of the town.
Okay.
That's where I was. So then after I graduated in 1951, and that was during the Korean War. So I enlisted into the Navy that fall because they told me I was going to be drafted. So I decided I wanted to go to the Navy instead of the Army. So I spent 4 years in active duty and 4 years in the reserves. And so now Pacific Junction is a part of the Glenwood School District.
Of Glenwood. Gotcha. Yeah. How big was the town when you were growing up? Do you know the population then?
600.
600?
It was a railroad junction. That's the reason why you got Pacific Junction. It was a part of the CB&Q Railroad, and it was a junction between Preston, Iowa, St. Joe, Missouri, and Lincoln, Nebraska. And a little town of 600, we had 2 motels and a restaurant right across from the depot because you see the crews come in there and they'd have to stay overnight and go back out the next day.
Mm-hmm. Need somewhere to eat.
And something else too that's unique too. When I was a kid, we had 5 gas stations in that town of 600.
Jeez. Any rhyme or reason, or just?
I have no idea.
It's interesting. How many of them are still standing today? Do you know? Do you keep up with your hometown
Last time I was there isn't any of them
anymore? Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of a sad reality of small town Iowa right now, I'd say.
Yep, it sure is.
Yep. And so you graduated, went to the military, and then what got you thinking about education?
Well, I was involved as far as coaching, helping, whatever you want to call it, kids after I got out of the service. And I went to work in construction. And I worked 2 winters in construction and found out that if I wanted to make a living that was going to be consistent, I was going to have to do something besides that, because the last winter we worked 3 days out of 3 months.
Yeah.
And so I decided, I needed to do something else. So I went ahead and went to college then. Yep. Then I ended up graduating in 1961 from college.
Which college did you go to?
Went to Tarkio College in Tarkio, Missouri.
Yep.
and it closed. And my understanding now, it is back open now on a limited basis on
Oh,
there. So,
nice. And then started your career at Oakland.
yep,
That's Oakland Riverside, I believe. Is that
that's,
correct?
that is correct. That's what
Yep.
it is now. Yes, yeah.
Yep. What was that like back in '61, getting hired at a small school and getting started?
Well, I'm going to tell you something you probably think would be interesting, being you're a teacher. When I was hired, all the men teachers were required to wear either a sport coat or a suit coat and a white, I emphasize, white shirt. You couldn't wear a colored shirt. It had to be a white shirt and tie. That was a requirement of all the men teachers that went to work there on there. And then my first meeting I had with the head football coach, because I went there as assistant uh, football and head tracks when I went there. And my first meeting with him after I was hired on there, he told me, he said, Jack, we, meaning himself and myself, we go to all of the school activities. And so that is something that has stuck with me. And I did that for all 37 years I was involved.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. Number one, I have worn a tie to school. Well, I've interviewed at I don't know how many different schools, but that's literally the only time I've ever worn a tie is to my interview. And I like to get to activities when we can now that we live in district, especially. But I would say you don't see more than a handful of staff at any activity much anymore down where we are, at least. So,
No,
and times have changed, that's for sure.
no. That was just something he had that he did and he passed on to me, what it amounted to.
Yeah,
On.
and it makes sense because the kids see you there, the parents see you there, and you build those relationships and makes your job a lot easier. That's for sure.
No.
Yeah. So you were at Oakland for about 10 years or so,
11 years.
11 years.
Uh,
Then what were your experiences like there coaching and teaching at Oakland?
well, it was great. You put it that way on there because when I was started there on there, they had had a down year in football the year before, which was unusual because uh, he had had a lot of success in that school. In fact, he was selected as coach of the year. I don't remember, sometime in the 50s, he was selected coach of the year, by the Des Moines Register, and so we went 8 years in football and lost 7 games,
Wow.
and we lost 3 of those my very first year.
Jeez.
So we went 3 years in a row undefeated, and then we lost 1 game for 4 years, each year for 4 years. And then on my ninth and 10th year, we were down. We didn't have a lot of success. And then my 11th year there, then we went back to where we lost 1 game again. And also then track, we were very successful. So I guess I was very familiar with success before I came to Britt. And I guess I'll put it this way, I was always very competitive and I was always very intense coach.
Yeah. And who was the head coach for Oakland back then on all those winning years?
Dick Harris.
Okay.
And we did not have football playoffs at that time.
No.
They were not existent, but Dick was on the original committee that helped to get the playoffs organized.
Yep. 1972 was the first year of football playoffs.
Yes.
And that
Yeah.
happened to be the year that you went over to Griswold to become the head football coach and head track coach as well as a classroom teacher. Why
Yes.
the move to Griswold? Was it an aspiration to be a head football coach?
No, it was just something that happened on there, and uh, Griswold had struggled
Yeah.
And I didn't understand why, because we competed against them and they always had a lot of very talented kids. So I decided thought maybe I could go over there and get that squared away. But football wise, we did not have very good success the 2 years there. Track, we were extremely successful on there. So, and I guess I'm not going to go into any more depth other than that. I just thought I could do something that hadn't been done there with the football teams because they always had so much talent.
Yeah. Yeah. And at this point, I assume since you went to Britt in 74 to be the principal, you were working towards your like master's degree and to become an administrator.
I already had my master's by
You
the
already
time
had
I
it.
was. Yes.
Yep. So
I,
what?
I, go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. Good.
I just gonna say I already had my master's when I moved to Britt.
Okay. So what? Then I'll reframe my question. What made you want to get into administration, and how did you land in Britt?
Well, I had a good rapport with the students in Oakland, and I guess I just figured that if I had a good rapport with the students that were in my class, that maybe I could do the same thing with an entire school.
Mm,
So I chose to try to be that person. Is what I tried to do, on there to move and see whether I could have that same kind of success there. So,
yep.
uh,
And how'd you end up getting the job at Britt? Did you just look in the newspaper and find it? Did you have connections from up there, people you knew? How'd that look?
no, that was through new at that time. The newspaper ads were the big thing as far as getting jobs were concerned. And I had applied for 3 jobs that year. And in fact, I got offered a job that year that I never even applied for. You know, why why is beyond me, but I didn't take it. And then we went to Britt. My wife and I drove up to Britt, which is about 3.5 hours for the interview, and then drove back home uh, that night after the interview. And they told me when I left uh, that it'd probably be about a week before I would know uh, about the job. Well, the very next morning, I was just getting ready to go out the door, and my wife come running after me and said, "You got a telephone call."
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, can they call back?" And she said, "Well, they're from Britt." I said, "Oh, okay." So, and it was Ted Runyon calling, and he offered me the job
Nice.
right then. So, I said, "Well, let me talk to my wife, and I'll call you back." So I talked to her right then, and just called him back and took the job. So, and we went up there then.
I always like to ask this question to people that are maybe, were in education a little bit before me. Do you remember what your first contract was for as a principal in 74? Could you ballpark guess what that was for?
And I know that you mentioned that on there, and I got to think about it. And then I don't remember. I honestly just don't remember.
Yeah, that's just fun for me as a teacher to see how the numbers change over the years. And some people have remembered, and it was just like, wow, that's less than like a coaching contract anymore, But obviously, you have to account for inflation and cost of living and stuff like that. But it's always just kind of interesting to me to,
I know what my very first contract was. The very first contract I had at Oakland,
yeah,
$4,550.
wow,
And that was coaching 2 sports.
that included your coaching.
Yes.
Jeez, that's less than just a coaching contract anymore, pretty much
Yes.
anymore in an average
Yes.
size school.
Right.
That's crazy. Uh, did you know the man you took over for, Lowell Battier, is the name I found? Did you know him or of
Oh,
him or
oh, Butler.
Butler? Okay, I must have written it down wrong.
Yeah, I did not know him. No,
Okay,
him, but I did not know him. No.
yeah. What kind of situation were you walking into when you got to Britt High School? Or things I know athletically were going pretty well. Wrestling had just won 3 titles. football had won a state title, track had just won a state title, athletically great. Did you have any big challenges you had to tackle, or was it business as usual
Well,
when you started?
let me back up and put it this way. When I went up for the interview with the school board on there, and by the way, I do remember all the school board members who they were.
Yeah.
That interview, John Hill was the president at that time. Paul Kelly uh, was one of the members, and Doc Thede,
Yep.
Berlin Ball, and Doc Deemer. They were the 5 school board members when I went up there. And what I was told at the interview is they wanted me to restore discipline in the building.
Okay.
And that was emphasized over and over and over many times. So evidently that was the reason why I was hired, because evidently my credentials showed that I was a strong disciplinarian. So that's the reason why I got the job.
Nice. So maybe a little bit of a culture change for some of the students with the new principal coming in. They had to toe the line a little bit, or how was that kind of tough at first, or did the things fall into place pretty easily?
No, we went through a little trial. Anytime you have something new that comes in, you're going to go through a little bit on there.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess one of the things that I found out was, like I said, they emphasized discipline. And my very first lunch hour, I had made a terrible mistake, because where I came from, the teachers took the students to the lunch line. So I assumed that was the same thing that was going to be there.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't. It wasn't. I was out in the hallway and like to got killed, like to get run over, on there. So we had a teachers meeting that night after school, and we did have a lunch line the next day.
Yeah.
And I told them they will be brought to the lunch line, and they will alternate. So each class, well, we had 3 sections at that time, and I said each class will get an opportunity to be first.
Yeah.
Well, of course, naturally they didn't like that to begin with, but after it got started working, they did, because then they realized, hey, we do get a chance to be first.
Yeah.
We never ever got that before, so that was just one of the things there.
Yeah.
So
Note to self: don't get trampled on day 2. Let's fix that. Yeah. Yeah. And the cool thing is the staff that you joined in 74, a
yeah,
lot of those teachers were still at the school when I got into high school in 2001. And Jack and I talked a little bit. There's so many great teachers to bring up and talk about. For the sake of not forgetting anybody or leaving anybody out, we are going to stick to a lot of athletic based things or just big picture things. But Jack made it pretty well known to me in our earlier conversations that you couldn't have worked with a better staff. Would you agree, Jack?
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, the way I put it, it may not be appropriate, but the way I put it, we had to go through a get acquainted period.
Yeah.
And after we did that, we had a very diverse staff, and you need that. If you're going to have any new ideas and changes and so forth, that's going to be good for a school, you have to have diverse ideas. You can't just all be ones thinking right down the line the same way all the time. So we had a great group of teachers for that. And whenever we did make some changes, once we went through the process and made the changes, then we would all be on the same page.
Yeah.
We had a great group of teachers, but there's something else I don't want to leave out too. We also had a great group of students there, and they wanted to be there at school, and they wanted to learn. It wasn't a matter of just coming to school. They wanted to learn.
Yeah.
And their parents wanted them to learn. So that was a big part of that school district.
Yeah. Yeah. And Wish there was more of that these days. I mean, I'm in a great school where we have great supportive parents and pretty good kids, but you click on the news or on social media and you don't see that all the time anymore,
Right,
unfortunately.
right.
Priorities have changed, that's for sure. Who were some of the first people, like when you moved to Britt, who were some of the first people you became friends with, acquainted with, got to know?
Well, I moved there on July the 1st. I do remember that. So as far as getting acquainted real quick with people, school wasn't in session, so there wasn't a big opportunity.
Yeah.
So one of the first people I met was Larry Miller,
Okay.
and he was a realtor, and he's the one that I uh, bought my house from, was Larry. And then another person that you probably are familiar with was Bill Dummett.
I
He owned
never knew Bill. No.
he owned the building that your dad ended up having the pizza place in,
Yeah. Was that the bakery then?
the
Yep.
bakery. Yeah.
Yep.
And I got to know Bill because I couldn't resist the smell.
Yeah.
When I drove downtown and so forth, I had to stop and go in there. So
Yeah.
I got acquainted with Bill, and uh, I bought. Well, never mind. But I did like the donuts and stuff, so I bought a lot of donuts off of Bill, and he was a good guy.
Yeah.
Had Marv Betcher, who was a bank employee, and that is where I got my house insurance from us through Marv there at the First State Bank.
Yeah.
And then another person that was a business owner was John Brock. He
Okay.
owned the Five and Dime on there, and so all those people were great people, and I've got a great respect for all of them yet today. So
Good. And the thing I've told people about Britt, you just mentioned literally a lot of business owners. Uh, Down here, we have three little nice little towns, but there's not a lot of business. Even to this day in Britt, you don't have to leave town to get anything. You can pretty much stay in Britt and get everything you need. It's a great, thriving small town. I've always
yes,
told people.
yes.
Yeah. So, all right, I'm
That's
going to hit some sponsors here, and then we're going to get
okay.
talking. We're going to throw out some random thoughts, team situations, events, things that you all encountered as the principal in Britt for all those years. So, thanks to Doug and Kathy Zool for sponsoring this episode today. And then Triple B's Food Trucks is one of my sponsors. Brett was my student teacher last year. He owns 4 food trucks in his business and is just thriving. They go all over the place, not just central Iowa. So find them on Facebook or call them at 641-895-0885. And then Advanced Door Systems in Forest City. Call them at 641-585-1900 for all your overhead door needs. Michael Ewing of Ewing Funeral Home and Monument Company with locations in Britt, Kanawha, Clarion, Belmont, and Dow's. Call Mike at 843-3839 or check him out at ewingfh.com. And then Miller and Son Golf Cars, located outside of Britt, has been for over 50 years. You can call Skip or Jim at 843-4132 or check them out at millergolfcars.com. All right, like I said, Jack, I'm just gonna throw out some stuff to you. Um,
Okay.
I had a lot of fun that website where you can look up all the Britt News Tribune newspapers. I just typed in Jack Fisher and I did it in about 5 to 6 year increments. And every time I did that, there would be 10 to 80 things that would pop up with your name on it in the paper from like school board meetings and articles and stuff. I usually, from when I book an episode and do sponsors and do my research and talking to the guest and then recording and then downloading and posting, it's about 8 to 10 hour commitment to do one of these episodes. I'm pretty sure it's more like 10 to 15 for your episode because I just had a lot of fun looking through like old school board meeting minutes. It was a blast. And then the people who wrote the paper back then, they did such a good job not just posting the minutes, but they wrote up stories about everything that happened. I'm sure a little bit to your dismay at times during some of those hard maybe meetings or moments you had, but man, I was just impressed with how detailed the paper was with what was going on at the school. I got to give kudos to the Brit News Tribune for that. So yeah,
Well, I'm totally surprised at the information that you sent to me that you found out about. I had no idea
yeah,
how you could find out some of those things.
Yeah, I had to kind of cut out a little bit, otherwise we'd have about a 5 hour episode. So maybe we'll do a part two someday, sometime down the road. But let's first talk about the 1980 Girls State Championship basketball team. What do you remember about that fun run in 1980?
Well, that was a really a great group. There's no question about that. And to me, the only thing I can say about that, that was just a fun time for the whole school. Of doing that. We got to play four ball games down there that year, and busy, yes, work, yes, but it was fun.
Yeah, yeah, because you were pretty involved with the administrative side of things with the athletic association, correct? Weren't you a part of some of the boards?
Yes, I was on the Iowa High School Athletic Association Representative Council for 2 terms.
Yep.
And I also served on the football playoff committee on there. And matter of fact, Benji brought that up on there. I'm the one that made the motion that all semifinal games be played in the dome.
Thank you.
Oh, and there was a coach, and I don't remember that coach's name, that seconded it. And after we discussed it with the Bernie Salgo, who it was, and the rest of the people on there, then it passed unanimously and went to the Board of Control. And the Board of Control, of course, is the one that has to make the decision, and they approved that recommendation, and so that's how it got started as far as all the semifinal games being played there.
And if memory serves me correct here, was that 1998? Does that sound about right? Because it was kind of like some teams got to play in the dome, the semis, some didn't.
Oh,
Until
it is before then.
was it before then?
Oh, yes, it was before then because I retired in '98.
Okay. I just remember there were times where some games would be like the 93 semifinals were in Britt against Lorenz Marathon, but then 95 we played in the semis every time after that. I didn't. For some reason that
Well,
98 stuck in my head, but I could be wrong.
before then, I don't know just how many years, Dan, before then, but it was before then.
Okay. Yeah. And I know some Brit people will argue um, if all the games were played outside, we'd have about 86 state championships because we're a ground and pound outdoor team. But from a fan perspective, man, I love the dome. um, you know, climate
It,
controlled, warm, in there, and
I,
uh, yeah. So
no, it was something you had to learn to do as far as playing in a dome.
yeah,
And I know that, I talked to Bob Sanger a lot, and, before this decision was ever made, and he always felt that it was a disadvantage when you had some teams that got to play their semifinal games there and others didn't.
yeah.
And so we visited about that quite a little bit. So, yeah.
If it was up to Coach Sanger, though, do you think he would pick all games, just play them outside through the championship, or do you? I know the dome's a great atmosphere and it's weather controlled and stuff, but I think knowing him, he would want it. Let's just play outside.
Well, that might have been at one time, but I do think he changed his mind about that.
Yeah,
I think once they got where it was all the semifinal games played there, he was much more comfortable with that because,
yeah,
he didn't feel there was some team that was getting an advantage by getting to play more times in a dome than what we would.
yeah,
I think he became satisfied with that part of it.
yeah. And we had our woes in the dome and didn't win as many games as maybe we'd hoped to, but as a running team that strictly relies on the run, for us to win as much as we have in the dome, I'd say is pretty impressive because that stadium, advantages the passing teams.
Right.
So for us to still have as much success running the ball there compared to playing passing teams, I'd say we've done all right. So
I've got to tell you a story there, Dan.
yeah,
I retired in '98,
yep,
and we played football down there in the dome then. And so I went down to watch the game. And I got on our section, up behind our section, but I got way up high, clear away from the student body. and there was four coaches sitting in front of me. And it was in the fourth quarter. I can't remember the exact score or anything like that. I know it's a close game. And we had possession of the ball. And so one of the coaches said to the other, said, well, what do you suppose you'll run? So they was arguing back and forth with each other. And so they were sitting right in front of me. And I said, he'll run the fullback. They turned around, they looked at me, didn't say anything, They ran the fullback and got 4 or 5 yards. And he said, well, second down. I said, well, what do you think he'll run this time? And I said, he'll run the fullback. So again, they looked at me, he ran the fullback. And third down, they turned around, they said, is he going to run the fullback again? I said, yes, he will. So, and he got first down,
Yeah.
So first and 10 then. And I said, well, fullback again? I said, yep, fullback again. So finally, one of them turned around and said, well, how did you know that? And I said, I was high school principal there for 24 years. This is not the first time I've seen him play.
Yeah. And I could pull out a tape from 13 years prior, and it would pretty much be the exact same thing. Yeah. And I talk with people about that. I hope it never changes, especially with teams getting more pass happy. I love the ground and pound and just the line it up and go at it. That was the Bob Sanger way of just we're gonna out tough you and be better than you. So.
Well, see, the coach, this Dick Harrison, I coached with down in Oakland. That was his philosophy.
Yeah.
So that wasn't something new to me to come to Britain and see that.
Yeah. While we're on this topic, so you coached football for a lot of years. Was there ever a point where you maybe had the opportunity to coach at the high school level with Bob and with Coach Perkins at all, or with being principal, would that have been too tough?
Well, there was one year when Bob and I did talk about it, and I decided that would probably not be a wise choice.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have done it, yes, but I just figured with my position on there that I just figured it would not be very wise for me to do that on there. So,
do you remember roughly what year that would have been? You talked about doing that.
Yeah, I do.
You don't have to say it if you don't want to. That's fine. But
yeah, I remember what it was. I guess I'll skip that year, but I do remember what it was.
Yeah,
they had a very successful football program that fall too.
Yeah. Which that doesn't narrow it down a whole lot, so you're safe there because most every year was pretty successful. So,
yeah. Well, it was 1984.
Yep. Oh, yep. That was the start of the dynasty.
Oh, well, see, then I had a son that played on that team, so I thought maybe it wouldn't be too wise for me to be there coaching and him playing. So,
yep. And he was a good one. He's up there in the record book in some of those defensive stats. So, and for you, it'd be more fun, less stressful, more fun to be a parent and a spectator as well. You get to enjoy it a little bit more. So, don't blame me there. But I assume you miss coaching to a degree. That was a little tough to not be coaching at times.
I did when I first became a principal. Yes, I missed that. I missed that contact on that you had. Yes.
Yep.
And I also coached girls basketball for 6 years.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. Oh.
Then the Bill Hudson connections and Britt. You had to watch girls basketball at a high level there, and football with Sanger, and man.
And that made me think when you said that. I watched that podcast with Vance and Chris.
Yep.
And Vance made a comment that really interested me when he said he had someone, I think from Buffalo Center, I'm not 100% positive that's right, that they asked him how come that they are always so good there. And he said, and I don't mean just football, they're good in everything.
Yep.
On there. Do you remember that comment he made on that?
I think it was my brother. My brother graduated from North Iowa, and we bring that up once in a while, and we're talking about stuff. Because I'll be, on a Friday night after a game and we only win by 40, I'll be like, oh, the guys didn't play very well. And he's like, shut up. Like, you're complaining about a 40-point win. Yeah, we're sloppy though. And he's just like, how is a small school always so good when you should assume there's going to be some cyclical talent cycles, Like, how does that happen?
But, to me, the reason for it was because of course, we had a great group of students there. There's no question about it, and great leadership from those people that was coaching those students on there.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just the athletics; it was all the extracurricular activities. We had great people conducting leadership in all those extracurricular activities. We had so much success. And you brought up Bill Hudson. I wished I had thought to do some research on this, but I can't remember the number of years that Bill Hudson coached basketball there and there's so many years in a row there that he never lost a conference basketball game.
Yeah.
Or I don't remember how many years on there.
Yeah. Kevin Wilson would be your man on that. He's working on some of the records for girls basketball right now. He'd probably be your man to find that out. Yeah, it's impressive. I mean, Bill was my guidance counselor, and growing up in school, I don't know if I ever knew he was the basketball coach until I was quite a bit older. But maybe by then he might have even been out of coaching by then. But
Yes, he
yeah.
retired the year before I did.
Okay, so I would have, yeah, my first couple years in elementary, he would have still been
Right.
coaching, been my guidance counselor. But as a little kid, you
Right.
don't know that type of stuff or pay attention or whatever. But I just remember him as a guidance counselor, and he was very good at that as well. So,
And see, my daughter played for him too. So, yeah.
uh, let's talk about the 1975 North Iowa Conference Wrestling Tournament. Big snowstorm comes through. I think
Yeah.
Lake Mills didn't even make it there because of the weather. But then the weather got so bad, people couldn't leave, couldn't make it home. So several teams and fans, coaches, pretty much were stranded at Britt High School. And from what I read, it's pretty fascinating. You guys just, kept the mats out, found places for people to hang out and sleep. What was that like having to host however many people got stranded at the school?
We finished the tournament.
Yeah.
We did complete the tournament, and then we had all those people that stayed there, and I was lucky that our cooks all lived in town, so I had to get a hold of our cooks and have them come up and prepare something for those people to eat on there. And well, like I said, we laid all the mats out, kept them all out for people to have a place to sleep and so forth. So that was quite an experience.
And some people stayed with De Leon's, I believe, and you and Mr. Runyon took turns kind of keeping things going. And
Well, I don't know. I don't know about people staying at Dale. I don't know that, but I know I know I was there all night. I know that. And there were some of the coaches, I don't remember just how many or who, but there were some of the coaches that stayed all night too. So
yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. And I mean, in 2023, can you imagine this happening and like the cooks coming back to fire up the whatever and cook some food, get some food? I mean, it's just, you would hope people would still do that, but I think anymore, people are more worried about legalities and, making,
yeah,
so
yeah.
it's just a different time. That's what makes that story pretty cool. That I don't know if that could happen anymore with all the liabilities and whatever else. So
Probably not.
yeah, yeah. I just thought that was pretty interesting. Let's talk student behavior. You said when we'll shift from sports here for a quick second. You said when you started, they wanted you to come and put some discipline back in. Um, see, from the mid '70s till 1998, what changes, if any, did you see in student behavior, academics? Just what are some of the things that you noticed over 25-ish years that
Well,
stand out?
quite honestly, I didn't really see a tremendous change on there.
Yeah.
Just the way I always was taught and felt about it is that students want discipline. The thing they want is they want it to be the same for everyone.
Yeah.
They don't want it, for this and this and this. They want it the same for everyone. So I didn't, I don't recall a lot of difference between the time when I first started, other than having to get things reorganized, to begin with.
Yeah.
I didn't see a lot of change between the time and when I left on there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's to me again goes back to the testament of a consistent staff over the years. When you have the same teachers, same administrators, makes a big difference. You have a lot of turnover. It's hard to be consistent, like you said. Totally. Yeah. And one thing I did find in the paper here, you talked about you didn't know your first contract. Reading through some school board minutes here, this was fun for me because my salary in 2023 as a fourth grade teacher is about $54,000 now. In 1982, you negotiated for a pay raise like you guys always did. It was $29,853. And in 1988, it was up to $38,859. Again, just kind of fun to see the comparisons, the numbers. I know our superintendent now, she's like 155, 160,000 right now as the superintendent. Principals are at that 100, 110 range. So, um, were those negotiations tense at all with the school board, or was it usually pretty easy going?
Well, actually, as far as principal's part of it is concerned on her, we didn't deal a lot directly with the school board. The
Okay.
superintendent did that.
Yep.
And that might have been the particular time frame. I don't know, or might have been a particular school. But the superintendent did the biggest of it. What the principals did basically was give reports that they asked for.
Yeah.
So, and of course, if we were asking any direct questions, at a meeting or something like that. But basically, the superintendent's wanted to directly with the superintendent.
Took care of all that. Yeah. All right, I'm going to hit a few sponsors here, then we're going to keep on going. Thanks to In His Image Photography for sponsoring the podcast that's owned by Ashley Mosier. Reach out on Facebook if you need any photo sessions. And thanks to Mr. Paul Hauge, one of my all-time favorite people. He's sponsoring a few episodes. That's great. So thanks, Mr. Hauge. And then thanks to the Britt Car Truck Bike and Tractor Night Cruise Nights for sponsoring all these podcast episodes. That's Jared Winger, owner of Mojo Productions. Call him at 515-408-1074. Then Window World of Mason City and the Showalter family. Once an Eagle, always an Eagle. Fly High Coach Sanger and Joey Showalter. Thanks to Katie Showalter for sponsoring. And then Kelly Real Estate, local real estate agency in Britt, owned by Steve and Deanna Kelly. Contact them at 843-4102. Jack, talk about technology. What was that like as the years went on as an administrator and computers and technology were kind of becoming more prevalent in schools? How'd you handle all that?
Well, I was there when the technology started in the high school.
Yeah.
And we had the old Apple computers that if the electricity blinked, you lost what you were doing.
Yep.
So you had to be sure to learn how to save frequently so you didn't have to start over all the time on it.
Yep.
So, and there was very few computers in the building. And then that changed into where we had two computer labs on there. And I know that that's entirely different now than what it was then. So,
yeah.
And we had, at that time, we had the apples. And basically, personally, that's what I've stuck with myself because Apple is what I knew.
Yeah. Those first Apple computers that were like orange and purple on the side, those are in museums now, I've seen. They're like considered ancient technology and antiques.
Well, that's where we started.
Yep. We had those floppy disk computers in elementary school.
Oh, yeah.
And man, on Friday afternoons, it was your turn to go into the computer lab to play Oregon Trail or whatever. That was a big deal for us. Yep. And then I'll never forget Mrs. Sanger, Linda. I was in her classroom when 9/11 happened.
Uh-huh.
And she was, kind of mentioned what's going on. And we're like, well, what's going on? She goes, go to Yahoo. And we're like, how do you do that again? She goes, okay, it's HTTP www.yahoo.com, enter, and then you wait, a couple minutes or whatever. And we're just like, this is amazing that we can access this stuff in under 5 minutes. And now it's like, oh, geez, like we're literally sitting here talking on
Right.
Zoom call in live time, and I'll post it on Facebook. It's just time. It's just crazy how it's changed from when I was in school to now. So I
Yeah.
was just curious about from the mid '70s to the late '90s. I'm sure you guys had to get educated on some of that stuff pretty quick.
I know they've got computers throughout the building now.
Yeah. Well, every kid has their own. The school
Oh,
gives
right,
them a laptop. And it's like, here you
right,
go.
right.
Yeah. And that's even down at our school through third grade. Every kid has their own laptop. They stay at the school for the most part up until like fifth grade. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's all technology based. So,
right, right.
um, so getting back to sports here a little bit. Um, Jim Timmerman, I want to bring up him a little bit because he's one of my favorite people. He's a Hall of Famer this fall. He's been uh, nominated to be inducted into the Britt West Hancock Hall of Fame. He was a great athletic director and a great coach. We all know all that about Jim Timmerman. What were your interactions like with him?
Jim and I had a good relationship.
Because he would have been the AD for a lot of the years you were principal,
Yes,
right?
yes, he was. Yeah,
You guys had to collaborate quite a bit with each other on
yes.
things. Yep, yep. And then sticking with coaches here, we had Bob Grangenet, great golf coach. Um, his '86 girls state championship golf team is getting inducted into the Hall of Fame as well. What do you remember about that '86 girls golf season?
Well, I know that we did not have the cell phones at that time. So when we got the word back to us that they had won the state championship, then we had to organize a caravan.
Yeah,
And so we had to do that all by phone, by the old phone. We didn't have a cell phone, and where to meet, and meet to bring them coming back from that day. And of course, um, I know you're aware. I had a daughter-in-law that played on that team, so so
yeah,
it just like I said about the basketball. It's another one of those fun times, you
yeah,
know.
yeah. Sandy was she was the ace on that team throughout most of that season. Did that podcast with them a couple years ago, and that was a great group, and they're pretty excited to get inducted into the Hall of Fame this fall. So
I
I'm
know they
excited
are.
for that night. Yeah. I know you said we're not going to talk all staff because you don't want to leave anyone out, but based on my research, you had two secretaries, correct?
Yes.
Can you talk about Lila Nalen and Peg Eisman for a little bit? Because Peg is one of my all-time favorite human beings.
Well, Lila was hired the same time I was hired.
Okay.
And I can't remember just exactly the time frame now, so I'm not going to try, but she ended up getting sick. And so she had to retire from that. But Lila was good. And then Peg come in and took Lila's place, and I worked with Peg a lot longer than I did Lila. And Peg, well, good secretaries are needed by anyone,
Yep.
regardless of who they are. And she she saved my neck a lot of times. So, no, they were both excellent people and excellent secretaries.
Yeah. And you know this, so this is not a knock on principals or teachers or anybody, but a good secretary darn near runs the school. Like when you're out and about and busy or we're in our classrooms teaching, they're the ones that are keeping everything going because they are constantly putting out fires we don't even know exist. Um, our secretary here at our school, her name's Susan, and her dad was ill and was getting close to passing away last year. And I happened to be walking by. I'm on my prep period, so I have 40 minutes. And she goes, "Hey, can you man the phones and my desk for 10 minutes while I have to talk to hospice about my dad?" Sure, take your time. 10 minutes turned into 30 minutes. And I think 478 things happened in those 30 minutes. And I was mentally drained. And as a teacher, you're mentally drained all the time. But she got back to her desk And I was like, everything happened. And she goes, you just, I explained things. She goes, you just described a normal Tuesday afternoon in my world, and I'm like, oh, geez. Good secretary, you need those people.
No,
And I
no.
knew Peg all through school and through church and stuff. And oh man, she's one of my favorites. I'm gonna try to get her on a podcast someday. I don't know if I'll be successful there because she's
I
yeah.
would do it.
That's kind of what I'm gathering. But I'm gonna bug her a few times. And
No, you asked her too about funny stories with students.
yeah,
So since you brought Peg up, that made me think of one on a funny story they had. At that time, we punched lunch tickets.
yeah,
So we had to go down the line and punch it. Well, I went down there and also stood right to the line every day. Well, this one particular day, this one section, man, it was really not very many students. And so she said, but boy, I wonder what happened. We just didn't have very many students. I said, well, I don't know. And they had those bathrooms right there in the hallway. So she went into the bathroom. And just as she's coming back out, well, here come another class. And it was a classroom of boys, and it was shop class, and they had not heard the bell.
yeah.
So here they come down. So she come out of the bathroom and she said, here, hold my purse, and handed it to me. And I took her purse, and she had a long strap on it. I just threw it over my shoulder. I just stood with that purse hanging down beside my leg there. Like I said, it's all a class of boys. You should have seen the looks those boys gave me going through there. I never even act like I even saw them. I just stood there.
They they probably didn't let you hear the end of that, did they? For a while, or you point your finger out and say, "I better not ever hear about this again."
And then another funny. You talk about funny stories. Another one I had, and I don't remember what year that was or anything, but they had a special dress day that day for the faculty and students. I don't remember what it was, but anyway, I decided to go ahead and participate in it also.
Yeah,
Like I told you, I always had a suit, coat, and tie. Always had the tie on. I always might not have the suit coat on all day, but I always had it with me. Well, that day I dressed appropriate to whatever the day was for that. When the word got around school that I didn't have a suit and or sport coat and tie on,
yeah.
then the kids started to come down to the office to look at me to see because they didn't believe it. I'd have a shirt and tie on. They come down and look. And again, I just act like I didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't it funny how the little things like that are big deals and things you remember all those years later?
Now, some of those things like that, some of those small things like that, you do.
Yeah. Yeah. And were you a shirt and tie guy all the way up until you retired then?
Yes,
Wow.
it was.
So you could put a
Except
tie on.
the only time I didn't was, when the students were gone and I worked 2 weeks after students were gone, and I worked 2 weeks before they came.
Yeah.
And I didn't wear the shirt and tie then.
Yeah.
Just as soon as school started, well, then I did.
Yeah. And just curious, what was your main reasoning for dressing up so nicely? Was it just to have that professional feel, or it was just your creature of habit at that point?
Well, like I said, when I started off, that when I went to Oakland, I was told that's the way we had to dress.
Yeah.
So that's something that just stayed with me.
Yeah.
Just, I just continued that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
just,
I don't think I saw a tie in our school this entire school year, honestly. Oh, maybe a couple times when our principal, like NHS induction or a few things like prom, but on a day-to-day basis, I don't think I saw a single tie. And if I ever got told I had to wear a suit and tie every day, I might be thinking of working out. I'm just not a dress-up type of guy, so but I just never think I can pull off that look very well. Um, I found something in the newspaper here I'm curious about. In the early 80s, you had some problems with attendance. It said some kids were struggling to get to school, stay at school, come on time, be there the whole day. You guys established some new policies. What were those attendance policies? I think some of it had to do with like semester tests. Can you elaborate on that a
yes.
little bit?
Well, it's been so long. I'll try to be as knowledgeable as they can. But I know we worked with a staff, and it was based on their days of attendance and how many semester tests they had to take.
Okay. That's what we did when we were in high school, so that must have carried over from you.
And uh, we had success with it, you
Hmm.
know, and you know, like anything, naturally you had, a couple of brief problems that developed too, but
Yeah.
you just had to work with it.
Yep. Yep. I think how it was when I was in school, if you missed 1 or 0 days, you didn't have to take any tests. If you missed 2 days, you had to take one test. If you missed 3 days, you had to take two tests, on and on. And so if you had to take one semester test, do you remember what most kids took for a test?
No, I do not. No, I
PE.
did
Everyone took the PE semester test. And so Coach Sanger would take us bowling for PE, and we would have to score the bowling games we played by hand and not use the screen up top there. And that was always a big part of the semester test. And I never got that part of the test right. It was always the one part I just could carry over the numbers to the next frame or whatever, and he'd always give me a hard time about that. Like, if I remember last year you bombed this part too, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think I'll ever get it right because the screen literally does it for me. So yeah, a lot of kids would take the bowling or the PE test if they had to take one semester test. So poor Coach Sanger and Mr. Drake were always pretty busy at semester test times, but oh well.
I honestly don't remember, so no use me trying to speculate.
Yeah. So, speaking of, let's go back to Coach Sanger here a little bit. 1996 state championship football team. Uh, that's still obviously a legendary season, legendary team. Did a podcast with those guys. Jeff Sanger was a senior that year, so special for Coach. What do you remember about that 96 title run?
Well, it was just a group of students that went out there and did their job night after night after night after night
Yeah.
on there. And you, to me, now I might not have been true with a lot of it, but to me, I just knew that they were going to do it.
Yeah.
Just the way they went about things. So,
Yeah. They're fast. I mean, they're team speed, big up front, tough. I mean, they were just the total package team. And I'll every chance I get to tell this, I still am pretty sure that Chad Klein has a state record. I've said this on other podcasts. Won a state championship as a quarterback and never completed a pass in the playoffs. 4 games, never completed a pass. I still think that's just one of the greatest stats of all time.
but I'm sure you're aware of that. I don't.
Yeah,
I know if it could have been any, it would have been one or two.
yeah. 2 of the games, I don't think they attempted a pass, and the others, it was like 1 or 2 passes. I mean, that was about it. So it's pretty crazy. But yeah, I went to every game that year except for the title game. I got sick during the championship game morning, and my dad went to the game and recorded it for me, and I wore out that tape. I watched it so many times. It was so fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did
Yeah.
you still wear a shirt and tie to the games, or did you dress down a little bit when you went to
No,
games?
I did not wear a shirt and tie to the games.
Yeah, yeah. Just,
Oh, I wore the typical Britt West Hancock gear when I went to the games.
back then, it was the crew neck sweatshirts. A lot of people wore. I remember seeing those a lot.
Of course,
Now we have the
when it was outside, nobody knew what you had on because you had so many big coats on.
yeah. Yeah, for most of those games, about October on.
I-
Yeah. I want to talk about another administrator you see in your notes here. Uh, Different buildings. You were in the high school, he was in the elementary, but I'm sure you guys worked together, conversed, everything. Talk about Hugh Carter. What do you remember about Hugh?
Well, Hugh Carter and I were great friends,
Yeah.
and we worked together all the time. He helped out with the high school activities on there. He was another one that was there for all of the activities on there, and we played a lot of golf.
Yeah. Who's better?
He was. No question about that. I mean, like I told you earlier, I was competitive, and I always, if I could get him once in a while, that'd be fine. But bigger share of the time, he got me. So. But a lot of times we played partners.
Yeah.
So, and we played a lot of the local tournaments together. At that time, we had a group that went around to some local tournaments, and we had some success
Yeah.
in playing some of those local tournaments. But he was a good guy, great guy, and a great friend of mine. And of course, my son, his daughter got married.
Yeah.
So
You were really good friends. Then you got a birthday parties and everything else together.
I yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Did you ever play golf with my dad?
I don't think I did. I think I was out to the course when he played, but I don't think I ever did. If I did, it couldn't have been very often. I don't
Okay.
remember. You know,
I asked him, he goes, man, I played with so many people over the years. It's hard to keep track type of thing. But with the restaurant, he was pretty busy. But the one night a week, mom would take over and he'd get to go out golfing. There'd be some nights where he's like, I'd have to go play around fast because I knew, I'd get to the clubhouse and they'd be like, you're needed back at the restaurant type of thing. So he always knew he had to get a quick round in if he could. So
I'm sure at the time when he was playing, that was when the course was very busy.
yeah,
You just didn't walk out there and play. You had to go down to number one tee and drop
wait,
your ball,
yep,
and wait for your turn.
yep. And I'm hearing that it's getting busier now. I go up for hobo days and play a round up there for the tournament, but
Right.
hearing that more and more younger people are around and playing a little bit, so that's always good to hear.
Yeah, I sure hope so.
Yep, yeah, it's a nice little course. Um, Before we wrap this up, I have to ask, what did you do to make someone mad in 1979 where they set your tree on fire? What happened there? Did you ever find out what happened in that? I was reading in the Brit paper.
I have no idea about that, to be honest with you.
That is crazy. Like,
They, they never did ever find out who did. I don't have the slightest idea.
that is nuts.
All
So,
I know is my wife comes said to me, he said, the tree's on fire. And I come down and look, and they never did ever find out who did it. So I don't have the slightest idea.
that is crazy. Obviously, you don't name names, but I'm sure you went around school for a little while after that and you wouldn't approach anybody, but you definitely probably had moments of, I wonder if it was him. I wonder if it was just
No, I didn't do that.
almost make you paranoid, though, is what I'm trying to say. Like, it would just be kind of weird, like just a crazy thing. So,
No, I didn't do that.
no. Did,
It was done, it was over with. And that's just like you made me think on it too, because I've had former students come up to me uh, after I'd retired, and they'd say, "Well, do you remember such and such and so and so?" And I most of the time I didn't. I'd say, "No, you
yeah,
don't." I'd say, "No." I said, "Let me tell you something. When something happened, I dealt with it, and it was over with.
move
Because
on.
if I remembered all that stuff, it would drive me nuts."
Yeah.
So I dealt with it, and it was done.
And it's funny, though, because I don't know how many minutes ago now you mentioned the day you didn't wear a shirt and tie and you dressed up like everybody else. Like, you remember that. Like,
Right,
it's just weird how our brains, our memories work where you remember those things, but you block out some of the big things because again, there's just not room to
right,
keep
right,
track of all that stuff.
right.
But I
I had no intentions of trying to remember all that stuff.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Again, you drive yourself nuts.
Right.
But a little bit on the flip side, I've talked to people that said you were well respected, well liked, tough disciplinarian. So you built good relationships with kids. But did they ever like have like prank days where they tried pulling stuff on you or the staff that you can remember? Fun memories like that where they had a little fun at your expense?
I'm sure they did. But as far as me pointing out something specific, I can't think of anything. But I'm
Again,
sure they did. I think it's more maybe joke type stuff than anything.
yeah, all in good taste and good
Yeah,
humor. And
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
good fun.
Here's the line, get close to it, but let's not cross it type of stuff.
Well, you
That's
see, it's unusual, I think, but every year I'd have some students in the morning when school started that would hang, because I was always right outside the office. There, I'd have a group of students, always different ones every year that hung around up there, and a lot of them would visit with me.
Yeah.
You know, but they just, for some reason or other, they just chose to come up there and hang around. And a lot of times, it was after some kind of an activity the night before.
Yeah.
They'd say, "Well, did you see so and so or such and such?" That type of thing. So,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Did you get TP'd at homecoming week? Was that a tradition to TP the principal's house?
no, no, it was not. But of course, it got TP'd when my kids were in school because that was typical that they did all the seniors.
Yeah.
They come around TP to seniors. So that was just part of it. That didn't
Yep,
bother me.
exactly. Yep,
That didn't
nice.
affect me.
Yeah. Then we fast forward to 2020 and we have a toilet paper shortage and we're like, what did we used to do? Like, why would we ever waste that toilet paper? That's a hot commodity now. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, getting ready to wrap up here. 1997-98 was your last school year before retiring.
Yeah.
Why was that school year the last year for you? How'd you know that the time was right to be done?
Well, it was just, I guess, just one of those things that it was time.
Yeah.
I've been at it 37 years, and I was 65 years old then, and it was time.
Yeah. And what's been keeping you busy ever since?
Well, the wife and I, we went down to Texas in the wintertime for 22 years.
Yeah.
And enjoyed that down there. And of course, talking about being competitive, I don't know if you know what shuffleboard is or not.
Yep.
Not talking about the table. I'm talking about on the ground, on the cement. Well, I played shuffleboard down there.
Nice.
So
where did you guys go exactly down south?
Pardon me?
Where did you guys go down south? What
We
city?
went down in Rio Grande Valley in Texas.
Okay.
We were 6 miles from the Mexican border.
Nice. Yeah, a lot better weather than Britt, Iowa in January.
Right. Right.
Yeah. What to sum up your time in Britt, how would you sum that up in a couple sentences or whatever, your time 25 years almost at West Hancock and Britt?
Well, before I get to that, there's one other
Yep.
thing I just thought of that I did want to mention that Eric Cooley said on another broadcast on there.
Yep.
Where he mentioned, if I'm correct now, you can correct me if I'm not, where there was a lot of the teachers' kids that participated and contributed.
Yeah.
In various activities at school on there. And Eric was very positive about that on there. And I guess, and then one of you mentioned, I don't know which one of you mentioned on that, one of the three of you, about the Sanger boys being criticized for getting to play because their dad was the coach. All of that stuff was the furthest thing there was from the truth.
Yep.
Because there probably wasn't, well, I won't put it that way. Those four Sanger boys were four of the best football players to play in Britt West Hancock.
Yep, definitely.
And teachers' kids, they always had the word given to them. The only reason why you get to play is because you're a teacher's kid. Well, that wasn't true either.
No.
They and anybody that had a real perspective of it on her knew that was not true.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd be remiss, we haven't really talked about him much here. Talk about Al De Leon here a little bit before we sign off. What was your relationship like with Al and watching his legendary wrestling program?
Well, Al and Bob both were very intense coaches. And like I told you, about myself, and I wouldn't have wanted them any other way.
Yep.
That's the way I would have wanted them to be, was intense coaches, because they loved what they did and they put their whole heart and soul into it. And to me, that's what should be done.
Yeah.
So, I enjoyed working with him.
Yeah, I mean, you guys were just, we were blessed in my era in the early 2000s with what we had. You guys just had so many great teachers and coaches throughout those years, and um, just yeah, again, proud of where we're from and everything that's been accomplished. That's for sure. So,
Yep.
well, Jack, I appreciate you coming on here. It's been fun. Next up on the podcast, I'm going to talk to a group of middle school teachers from when I was in school, and then Jeff and Brighton Kudej, the 1977 through 79 volleyball teams that made it to state. So it was a lot of the students and coaches you were a part of and with back then, and then Dean Hiscocks, and then Steve Perkins. We've had to reschedule that episode of Steve a few times, so I'm knocking on wood this time that we get that episode done. Do a great tribute to his dad, Hall of Famer Gene Perkins, as well as
Right.
Steve's career at Madrid as well. So, any last minute things here that we didn't talk about that you're thinking of and want to throw out there before we wrap it up?
Well, I sure don't think so, Dan. Yeah, you've done a good job, and like I told you, I just appreciate you letting me come on, and I hope that maybe I give a little bit different perspective than what some of them have, and
Definitely.
thank you,
Well, and
thank you.
and my thing, Jack, is when you're an administrator, a lot of your day, and this is just from my experience with my administrators that I've had over the years, a lot of your day you're dealing with the negative. Teachers, we get to deal with a lot of the positive. You know, we're working with kids and things are going pretty well. If a parent has an issue, usually they go to the principal, then they go to the superintendent. I don't think you guys as administrators get appreciated as much as you should. A lot of what I hear is like, well, they should deal with it. They get paid how much more than we do. And I'm like, they're still human beings. They're former teachers. They know what it used to be like being in our shoes. Yeah, they get paid X amount. So they do deal with things we don't deal with. But people kind of take the human element out of administrators sometimes. We're um, sometimes pretty harsh and pretty hard on principals and superintendents. And so I just wanted to throw out a thank you for all those years of service because it is, I would, again, like I couldn't do the secretary's job for 30 minutes. There's no way in Hades I could do a principal job or superintendent job at all. I couldn't do that for one day, let alone 25 plus years. So thanks for all you did for Britt and West Hancock, Jack.
Well, thank you, Dan. I appreciate that.
You bet. And take care. Best wishes in Waukee and
Okay,
go Eagles.
you bet.